Recently, I asked some people why they come to Miami Beach. And these were visitors from Europe, and they said they come to Miami Beach because it's like living on another planet. There's great celebrities and there's great parties. And then I asked a local, why do you live on Miami Beach? And they told me, in addition to the sun and the ocean and the beautiful climate, this is a place where people love to be outrageous just for the fun of it. And then there are other people who love watching other people being outrageous and can enjoy it. And it's really a fine balancing act for a leader of the city to be able to accommodate both the tourists and the locals. Now, sitting next to me is Dan Gelber, who is the newly elected mayor of Miami Beach. You were a prosecutor, and then you came to this job. This is like going into your father's business, isn't it?
Well, to a certain extent it is. I was a federal prosecutor for a long time, and sometimes I do feel like the John Lithgow character in the movie Footloose, where we're going to ban dancing because I have 3 teenagers, but other times I feel like, I've got another job, which is to be a ringleader of this, of what's going on here. It is a balancing, because I've always believed, and I was born and raised here, that this city's virtues are also its challenges. You know, people want to come here. They want to come here for the beaches and the vistas and the weather. They want to come here for, now I think, the art and culture. But on the other hand, they want to come here, which creates challenges for residents who sometimes, while they like to see things, also like to go to bed at night or like to know that their streets aren't as congested. So you do have to balance and have a resident lens as the mayor, but also recognize that you are an economic engine for the community.
Well, what made you decide to go into politics? This isn't your first one. You were in state politics and rose very high in the hierarchy because you had a reputation, just like your dad's, for being honest.
Well, I appreciate that, and I think ethics are an integral piece of being in elected office or appointed office. I think people have to trust you, and you can't be ethical part of the time. You got to be ethical all the time to develop that. And my dad and my mother as well, who was a teacher in our feeder pattern for many, many years, really believed in being honest public servants. They felt like that was what it was all about, and all of their kids, including me, saw that every day. They were all role models. We were a very close-knit family. We still are. But that said, to me, this city has those challenges, and it's really incumbent on the mayor and the government, elected and appointed, to figure out how to keep to keep it all at a proper balance. And sometimes it's hard, because you can't control how many people are coming to the city. You can't control what they're doing. I mean, think about this statistic. Our city is about 90,000 people. It's almost, as long as I can remember, been about 90,000 people. On a weekend, it could be 200,000 to 300,000. On a special event, it could be 400,000. And that includes residents, visitors, and permanent workers. Because unlike a lot of other places, we have tens of thousands of people who work here but don't live here. So we have all these different communities intersecting on our roads, on our beaches, at our nightclubs, and it creates a lot of potential conflict. We are a small town that is honestly one of the most famous cities in the world. So that's sort of the trick of the beach. How do you have the advantages of a small town, but still manage to be this big city? Because people don't come here because they want to be in any town in USA. They come here because it's a little more interesting. It's got elements that other places don't have. And that, to me, is what you got to do as your mayor.
Well, that's the unique thing about this town. This is a city where everybody can be a city activist.
Yes.
And if they've got a gripe, even at your commission meetings, you've got what I call the kvetching hour, where people can get up and complain about anything, and very patiently you and the other commissioners sit there and shake your heads and they're going, oh my God, what are they talking about? But sometimes somebody gets up there and says something that's really important. And at that moment, everybody on the commission suddenly pays attention and things get done. And this is the only city in the world where we have that. We even have breakfast clubs where people come. And you've been there, and I've heard some of the questions that people have asked you about and the issues that affect them. I'm going, I never thought of that.
Yeah, well, I mean, the thing about, look, I spent 10 years in the legislature, in the House and the Senate. I watched my dad. I've been around other elected officials. I've been in this office. Listening it cannot be overstated. There's such a value to it, because whenever you hear a complaint, you have to figure out whether it's an outlier or whether it's a system-wide issue. And the only way you can figure that out is if you listen to all the different pieces of the mosaic so the picture can be painted for you. So do you know whether you have a problem with the way you're permitting for one guy or whether it's a system-wide issue? A problem with police actions or safety with one person or one neighborhood, or is it system-wide? And the only way you figure that out is by listening yourself and looking at statistics. The second thing that I think I'd say is, you know, when you watch those kvetching hours, I don't really view them as kvetching hours. I always have said this: if it's important to the person, it should be important to us. And because some people you may listen to and say, oh, that's petty, or that's such a small thing, why are they talking about it in front of the whole commission? But to me, if somebody decided to come to City Hall to let me know how they feel, it's important to them. And whether or not I agree with them, whether or not I can do something about it, that's another issue. But if it's important to them, I'm going to listen, because I think they have a right to be listened to. That's the very least. It's the minimal job performance of a mayor, is to listen to constituents, and I'm certainly going to do that.
Well, I could say personally that you and Jimmy Morales, our city manager, does more than listen. They actually consider the value of what's being said and act on it. And before things become major public relations problems, they're all settled, and everybody's happy, and everybody feels it's fair, even if they lose. It's, you know.
Listen, we remember, we're a city that has, I don't know, I mean, Jimmy Morales is our city manager. Jimmy Morales spent 7 years at Harvard, got 1 B+ between undergrad and law school, and he grew up in this city. He was a couple years younger than me. He was very good friends with my younger sister. And I don't know that there are many cities that have a manager who is so accomplished, but the truth of the matter is he really wants to do a good job. There are so many times where I'll forward an email from a constituent complaining about something, and it may seem minor. He'll come back immediately and say, here's what we found, or I forwarded it to somebody and here's what they say. And that's how government should work. There are cities, and I suspect many cities, where you try to get something, that kind of response, you're not going to hear. Now, people don't like sometimes hearing something they don't want to hear, but they're going to get a response, and they're going to be listened to. And I know I feel that way, and I know Jimmy does.
Well, at a recent meeting, I heard you speak about having an inspector general for the city. Is there any corruption in this city?
Well, an inspector general does 3 things: fraud, waste, and abuse. Fraud is corruption, and that is sort of bright letter corruption. Fraud is taking money you shouldn't take, taking services you shouldn't take, doing something that the law forbids. And there is some of that going on in every city, because when you have a couple thousand employees and you have a city like this, especially like this, where there's so much money out there, there's going to be a level of corruption. And but far more damaging to a city is waste and abuse. Because waste is when you spend money needlessly, and abuse is when you spend money purposefully that's unnecessary. And so waste and abuse are generally the things in government that lose taxpayers' money. And so for me, and I have a lot of experience at it, when I was at the U.S. Attorney's Office, I did a lot of work with Inspector Generals. I also worked in the U.S. Senate, where I ran the Senate's Investigations Committee and worked almost entirely on fraud, waste, and abuse. So those are the things that really diminish government and, by the way, waste taxpayer dollars. So I'm very excited we're going to have an Inspector General.
You asked me earlier where we came from and why we came down here, and I said we came from New York, but the reason we came down here was at that time there were 107 empty stores on Lincoln Road, and we were artists, and we got a storefront, 1,000-square-foot storefront for $98 a month.
Not happening today.
And it wasn't just us. At one time, Lincoln Road had 82 artist studios and 14 galleries, and the ballet rehearsed there, and the New World Symphony rehearsed, and culture started to boom on the beach. And Miami is turning out to be one of the great cultural centers of the world. There are almost as many museums here as New York. And then Miami Beach gets Art Basel, which if you love art, you can see enough art in a week to last for the year, and people that go to galleries don't get that opportunity. And we have all kinds of performers that just want to say, I have played on Miami Beach. The cultural boom is going on. How long do you think it'll last?
Well, look, I grew up here, and we didn't have that kind of culture when I was a kid. We really sort of relied on our beaches and our weather almost entirely. We had a little bit of culture. And what's happened in the last 10 or 15 years, more than really anything, really since Art Basel 17 years ago came here, is that we have become truly a cultural center. For me as mayor, here's what I want to see. I don't want this to last. I want it to be who we are. I want our brand to be an art and cultural destination like the great art and cultural destinations of the world. For this reason, we have always tried to figure out what kind of tourists we want here. And the best tourist is an art and cultural tourist. They spend a huge amount of money, which is good for our economic base. They're pretty well behaved as a general rule. But most importantly, and this is where that balancing we talked about comes, when you have more art and culture, you also are providing elements to your residents that they can avail themselves of. So maybe they don't, but they have that right too. And they're friends and relatives who come in. I always think of what I want in my city when a friend visits and they say, where do I go? What do I do? 20 years ago, I told them to go to the beach. Now I tell them, well, you can go to Soundscape Park, or you should go see the Ice Cream Museum, or you should go to the Bass or the Ballet, or you should go to the New World, or just go over the Causeway to the Arch. There's some great performances there. And all of a sudden they realize it's not a choice, it's a embarrassment of riches. And so for me, our city, and a lot of this is not driven by the city, it's driven by the industry of people. But the city ought to be branding itself as this art and cultural center and promoting it any way we can. And so for me, that's the thing. We build on Art Basel because in a lot of ways, and I've said this a few times already, but I think it's very true. Miami Beach is a city that's always trying to create its best version of itself. And art and culture is the best version of our city. It is the best version, and it's what we should promote. And so it's not how long it'll last, it's the permanency of it that's important, because I want every mayor after me to feel like this is what we are, this is who we are.
Well, that's a great explanation, and I've got nothing to follow it up except to say that you are now the cheerleader in chief of the city, and you do a great job.
Thank you very much, Stewart. Thank you very much.